Hi, this is Anna, Imagination with the Healing Garden. Welcome to Shifting Perspectives. And if you are new to my channel, I am a philosopher, psychologist, sociologist of 30 years. So I've had this ball of massive tangle of threads that I've been pulling apart all morning. I've got like 4 videos total here, maybe 5, where I analyze this. I am down to the last video, maybe one of 2 last videos, where I talk about 2 topics: self-reliance versus integration of community versus data analysis applied to your problems. This all started with data analysis, how I was referring to problem solving versus story sickness. So I had this moment where I'm going, all right, which topic is next? Is it the self-reliance versus integration of community, which is the third perspective, or is it data analysis applied to your problems? And I realized something philosophically. They're pretty much the same topic. So I'm trying to figure out exactly how to interweave or prioritize these 2 topics when in fact they are so tightly woven together, it's almost impossible to prioritize one or the other. So I'm going to definitely jump around between these 2 topics during this video because they are the same thing and they are also standalone topics and they're equal. I can't pull them apart. So in an earlier video today, I talked about problem solving versus story sickness. We're going to go back to that for a moment, where I referred to habitual repetition. In habitual repetition, we basically get up, we have a routine, we realize that we have mediocre results or little to no result. We're not happy. We evaluate the day and we say, I'm not happy, but tomorrow will be better. And then we wake up and we do the same thing. And I explained in that previous video that while we're going through this habit, we're not stopping and actually analyzing the data. We're just accumulating the data. So let's talk about that right there, is the difference between accumulating data versus analyzing the data. So let's assume for a minute, in my example, I've been doing this for 10 months where I'm doing the same thing every day and I'm getting the exact same results. And now, of course, there's going to be people in the audience who like to say, well, insanity is, yeah, it is doing something different or doing something the same every time and expecting different results. That's not insanity. Insanity just means illogical. And yes, that is illogical. Therefore, one could say that that is insanity. So fine, you win this argument. Now, why is the question I love to ask. Why are we doing this? And it's not me. It's everybody I speak to is doing the same thing. Where we get up, we habitually do the same thing. We get the same horrible results. We are miserable with the results. We evaluate. Oh, I'm not happy. Well, tomorrow will be better. And we do the same thing. Why? Now, the conclusion is very simple. Radical change. We need radical change. We need to break out of our comfort zone with absolute radical change. This is called the growth zone. The question comes back to how to fix this problem with the answers, I don't know. So we look into data analysis. Now, let's take a look now over at self-reliance versus integration of community, which is the third perspective. At what point do you ask for help? And that is the question that I'm actually asking myself. This is the ball of thread where I'm going, I have an ethical dilemma. I am up against the third perspective. Well, shit. So I couldn't just analyze the third perspective because everything is connected. It took me 5 videos to present each and every thread to this massive puzzle of the third perspective to finally ask the question, how much self-reliance should a person have versus relying on community? Now, I will be very blunt with you. My third perspective was violated to the point of abuse when I was a child. Most of ours was, which means I never fixed my third perspective, which is why I struggle trusting people. So this is me restoring my third perspective, and this is how it's done. The third perspective tackles trust in others. And every time you tackle trust in others, you are really tackling self-trust. Do I have the ability to make a proper decision on trusting the right people? It's a scale. It's a How much do I trust myself and become self-reliable versus how much do I put my faith in other people so that they might help me? Now, black and white thinking is very much, you can't trust anyone. Yeah, that's the extreme. And remember, everything is on a spectrum. Now, one of the things I've noticed with spectral emotions is mine, it's trademarked, patent pending. Spectral emotions is when you have black and whites of every emotion. You have extreme opposites. And people who are traumatized tend to gravitate toward extreme. If you are really religious versus really an atheist, you're going to ignore spirituality. And spirituality is that gorgeous comfort zone right in the middle that's all grayish, that no one, everyone is black and white thinking. You see how this works? Every time, it's an absolutist. Absolutes is a symptom of trauma. You will hear this with, that's black and white thinking. Absolutes is trauma. Anytime you use the word always, every time you use the word never, every time, everyone, no exception, prejudice. That's what this is really about. Prejudice. Bottom line. Black and white thinking is a really pretty word for your prejudice. Bottom line. Men, women, well, what about the luminals? I identify as gender fluid. Lately, I feel real solid about being a transgender. I feel like I have all three genders crammed inside of my brain. I feel like more of a masculine. God, I hate that word. I feel like I'm more of a provider than a nurturer. And sometimes I feel like I'm both at the same time, equal amounts. When I started to heal, when I got to a certain point in my intellectual studies, the concept of sexuality and gender really started to become so meshed and gray together that everyone started to look like both a man and a woman and a gender neutral person. Every time I look at another person, I can see both and all inside of them, including myself, including my partner. While I, on a personal level, try and figure that out, I'm not going to talk much about it because I've got a lot of thinking to do. And I'm probably going to do some videos where I just explore transgender and gender fluid on my own, of course, on my podcast, but not with Shifting Perspectives, and definitely not here, not yet. I'm not ready. That being said, absolutes is a form of prejudice. And every perspective, a reminder that at this time there are 12, every perspective very much has a weakness, a lesson to learn. And these lessons that they have to learn, these weaknesses, are extremes that they have to get over. One of my favorites is the 7th and the 8th perspective and the 9th. When you cross over from the 6th perspective to the 7th perspective, you experience extreme silence because you lose all words. You go, I don't have the vocabulary to explain what I'm looking at. And you're stuck in your own head, mute, incapable of articulating what you are looking at. You are isolated, so alone, because you are looking at something so extraordinary and you can't articulate it. And people, friends, lovers come to you and they're like, hey, are you feeling all right? Yeah, I'm feeling all right. You seem different. I am different, yeah. Are you all right? Do you need to talk? And you can't say anything. Welcome to the 7th perspective. Total isolation. It's like you are alone with the universe. It's just you and the universe. I have seventh perspective videos. If you take a look at my subconscious dialogues, you can see what seventh perspective is like. It's a lot of me going, I don't know how to explain this. I don't want to talk. I just, seventh perspective. When you finish out the seventh perspective, when you reach the end, you reach that moment. And this is the ethical lesson that you finally internalize. I value communication. Literally, it's like a light bulb goes on in your brain at the end of the seventh perspective, and you suddenly prioritize. That's it. You suddenly prioritize communication. It's like you appreciate communication because you've been without it for so long. You suddenly appreciate the value and the ability to articulate what you want to other people. As soon as you have that shift in priority, boom, you switch over to the eighth perspective. And of course, like a pendulum, you're going to swing the absolute opposite direction. Prejudice. So you're over here now in the eighth perspective. You can't shut up. You're rude about it. You talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. You don't give a shit who you're walking all over because you can talk. Eighth perspective. The weakness on this side is understanding that words can hurt other people. You have to learn the lesson. You have to go through it. It's part of learning. Unfortunately, hurting people and stepping on people is part of learning that you can hurt people. I'm sorry. After a while with the eighth perspective, you start to realize this, and your priority shifts again. Your priority shifts to valuing other people. That's the ninth perspective. And you go here in the middle where you go, all right, I'm going to talk. I'm going to learn. I'm going to communicate. I'm not going to go silent. And I'm going to value how my words affect other people. This is where I discovered the emotion dignity. And suddenly my videos, if you go back to the eighth perspective of my videos, you'll see how I was talking, really rude and all over the place. And then I settled down into the ninth perspective. I had moments of shame, moments of guilt, moments where I wanted to go back and delete the eighth perspective because it embarrassed me. But learn. Because you're going to get there. You're going to get to the eighth perspective. And to have that example really goes a long way. So when I got into the ninth perspective, it was learning how to balance all of that with the ninth perspective. And then at the end of the ninth perspective, I learned another ethic, which turned me on over to a different priority, which shifted me into the 10th perspective. A perspective shift is all about shifting priorities. That's all it is. You are just changing what you prioritize. And to change what you prioritize is 100% dependent upon what ethic you value. This is not subjective. This is science. Every person goes through this. And if you don't, you stall out and you stay stuck at one perspective. Now, I'm at the 11th perspective. And this is what I have learned from all of the perspectives that I've gone through. There are layers to each perspective. So you'll go through the first 4 perspectives and you'll go through them again. And the second time you go through them, you learn them a lot deeper. And then you can go through the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th perspective. But that time when you go through them, you get a little bit deeper. And then you go back to the beginning and you learn them all again from the first all the way up. And you get a little deeper. So it's like the internalization of the 12 perspectives just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And every time it gets into a depth, it's like each perspective has its own level of depth. So there's the first level of the first perspective, the second level of the first perspective, the third level of the first perspective. I can feel this. So I'm through the third round now of the first, second, and now the third perspective, where, yeah, I learned the third perspective, but now I'm learning it on a whole nother level. And now it's bringing into question other things. Other things like, let's talk about trusting people. Do I trust people? Yes, I trust people. I trust the right people for me. I trust my partner to the end of the world. No doubt. Absolutely zero doubt. If I need that man, he will drop the world for me. Likewise, he has the same trust in me. If that man calls me at 2 a.m., I'm dropping the world and I'm saying, I'm getting on the train. Where are you? I'll be there in an hour. Trust. Reliability, dependence. But what about self-reliance? Now, those black and white extremes will go, you can't trust anyone. You have to completely rely on yourself. Well, thank you very much from that extreme. Let's look at the other extreme. The other extreme is can't doers. I can't do it. I'm completely incompetent. I'm useless. So you have absolute solid, only trust yourself. People are garbage and you can't trust anybody. Or you have the other extreme. I can't do anything. I require all the help. And now I'm going, maybe there's an in-between. I know there is, because I can recognize black and white prejudice. I can recognize prejudice thinking. This either-or concept that we have in our brains is what I like to call a oneist perspective. The oneist perspective is an abstract fiction that I love to take on. And the reason why I love to take it on is because it makes logical sense. So I use it a lot. A oneist is someone, I believe it's a race of people, a species, and I believe we are oneists. Hypothetical. Let's just go with this for a minute. A oneist can't think outside of either or. And a oneist only thinks in terms of prejudice. We can't help it. Until we become consciously aware, we're not going to be able to see the world any other way. And that's the problem. A lot of us are not consciously aware. So we have the oneist, the only trust yourself, or I can't do anything right. I need everyone to help me. I don't need anybody. Bring them together. Create a cocktail. The cocktail thinker is easily the hardest thing that I have ever undertaken. I had multiple personalities, so I could only be Joanna. I could only be imagination. I could only be Kalan, or I could only be Bergen. And when I integrated, I had to bring everybody together. And my God, that was hard. It's like my brain immediately defaulted to a sorting that removed all dichotomy. It was as if I was anti-dichotomy. Fine, you can have more than one, but it cannot contradict. There's that oneist again. And I was still prejudiced. You see, I am an anarchist who is a pacifist. I am an activist who's a pacifist. I am a feminist and I love men. It doesn't make sense, does it? And I remember thinking, my father's prejudice, oh, well, if you're a feminist, you have to hate men. Either or. Competition. 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 Hierarchy. There can be only one. It's so hard to abandon prejudice. Either you're a girl or a boy, masculine or feminine, man or woman. Why the war? No, Sorry, I'm all three. Sorry, I can feel it. I'm all three. I am all three at the same time. And I move and I flow like water. And it feels right. And it's not just the gender, it's everything. It's this combination of I'm becoming a cocktail. And this is what waits for you after the seventh perspective. This is really it. It's when all of these oneist labels start to go away and things start to fuse into a massive cocktail. It's when you stop looking at just science or just religion or just Christianity or just atheism and you go, what's with all the oneists? No, let's bring them all together. So here I am now at this point in my life, looking back at the third perspective, going, trust. Let's talk about prejudice. Can you rely on everyone? No, you shouldn't. Can you rely on no one? No, that's bullshit. You need to work out your trauma. You can rely on some people. It's going to be up to you, self-trust, to be able to select the right people for you. The words for you or for me, depending upon which perspective you are referring, makes all the difference in the world. This is the truth for you. This is the experience for you. This is the person for you. This is the point of view for you. But we think like oneists. Everything's got to be prejudice and everything's got to be extreme and everything's got to be boxed and tailored and labeled. Why do we do this to ourselves? I believe it's a sign of education. I believe it's just natural evolution. I believe that we are stunted at age 2, 3, and 4 years old of growth, and that our nature and our evolution is to grow up. Now, our bodies are growing, but our minds are stagnant. I believe the subconscious mind, the ethics, and the person have stalled out at age 3 and 4, which is why a lot of us are showing signs of being at the third and fourth perspective. The sixth perspective comes along and pushes that barrier because they desire that growth and that change, and now they're pushing themselves. But they're abused by that third or fourth perspective because they're different, because they're oneists, and they don't understand things outside of their black and white extreme prejudice. But that's really what we're dealing with here is prejudice. All the different colors and types of prejudice. It's the concept that we all have to be only one because we're obsessed with one. And it's extraordinary when you sit down and you start to look at that third perspective, the ultimate question of that third perspective, which is, should I be self-reliant or, there's that either or again, oneists, should I ask for help? And at what point should I ask for help? And then traumas in your mind going, oh, well, if you ask for help, you'll be beaten. Or if you ask for help, you'll be weak. Or if you ask for help. And then there's the flip side of that extreme where you always ask for help. You don't do the work on your own and you rely too much on other people. So my question now is, where is that happy medium? Because society says one thing, and what society says on this topic is only 100% contingent upon who abused you. Did a third perspective abuse you and teach you this ethic? Because they're going to tell you that you need no one and you should trust no one. Or did a second perspective abuse you and teach you that you needed everybody? Because that's what the second perspective is. The second perspective says that you need everybody to take care of you. The first perspective says you need to have everyone take care of you. The third perspective says no one should ever take care of you. The fourth perspective says you need both. That's really the moral of the third ethic, is when you finally get to that point where you realize it's a little bit of both. There is no word for this. And this is the problem, because we are so extreme in our thinking and because the world that we live in is a fourth perspective world, these words don't exist yet. So there's this other emotion, this other place of thinking where it's a cocktail of both. It's that middle ground, that gray area of, all right, so you have to be self-reliant to a point, and then you ask for help. It's as if I'm reaching And then the other people need to reach out and touch me as well. But the third perspective, one of the things they have to learn is to even reach. The third perspective is like, I'm not even reaching. Whereas the first and the second are doing all the reaching towards toward that third perspective who won't even reach out. And the lesson of that third perspective is finally learning how to reach out and connect. And most of us have not learned it. The question is, where is that point? Where is that moment when you should finally step forward and say, okay, I'm calling uncle. I need help. And I don't know it. This is what I'm trying to figure out. Is where is that moment? And the best thing about all of this is that gorgeous guilt that comes along with it. That guilt that just completely swims in from that third perspective father, shaming you for asking for help because it's weak. Trauma garbage. Break the cycle. Drop that off here. Because that's not what this is about. And it's about carrying your own weight. We're talking about radical self-reliance. And I almost want to say that the burner mentality is a black and white extreme again. Yes, it is. It reeks of it. So they're wrong too. And it's that radical self-reliance, because that really does encompass that third perspective attitude of you can't ask for any help. Radical self-reliance. And I'm going, maybe that's the problem. Now, I'm on Facebook all day and I see posts and memes coming through about all these great ideas. People with so many ideas. We should do this. We should do this. And no one puts it into execution. No one puts it into execution. No one. I have seen things like radical farming, where every neighbor in the neighborhood plants a certain vegetable or fruit, and then all of the fruit and vegetables are pooled together and traded. No money required. Great idea. Executed in a few countries, not located here in the United States, in my area anyway. And I'm looking at it going, why aren't we doing this? It's like there's this gap of here's the idea and here's the desire and the people to do it, but they're not connecting. And I see this over and over where the idea is born, the enthusiasm is there, and then it falls flat over and over. And I'm going, why aren't people taking action? What is missing? What is this element X that will take these ideas and actually propel them forward into action? And this is why I was studying physics yesterday, because, okay, so basically, according to the laws of physics, you require inertia, you require motivation in order to propel that forward. And in order to get motivation, you require a catalyst. A catalyst in this case would be discomfort or anger. The problem is no one's getting angry. No one's getting angry because anger is bad. No, it's not. So you've got a lot of people who are throwing away anger. And when anger has 3 stages to it. Your first stage is violence and aggression. Your second stage is communication. And the third stage of anger is change. But you got to get angry to get to change. But everyone has thrown out the baby with the bathwater when it comes to anger. Buddhists do it. Christians do it. A lot of religions do it. Our society does it. Fourth perspectives do it. In fact, the only one who's willing to embrace anger are narcissists who are actually closer to the truth than the rest of us because they get this part of life. Anger, unfortunately, they're the aggressors usually and they're violent, and everybody else associates anger with violence because of the narcissist, so everyone else rejects it. And that's the problem. Now, the problem with the narcissist is they're stuck at third stage perspective, which is third stage perspective aggressor. So they're going to be violent because they haven't evolved into the fourth and fifth perspective yet. But when they do, they're the people who change the world, if they can finally evolve out of that third perspective. We are really fucked up as a people, aren't we? Anger is where change happens. It's where you finally get to that point where you say, I've had enough. Boycott. Take action. Do. But there's just talk. There's just a lot of talk. There is so much talk. So there's the self-reliance versus integration of community. Now, data analysis applied to your problems. And that's really the big one. I'm going to stop the video here and start up the next one for part 2 of this, because now the last thread of this ball of thread that I'm holding is that data analysis applied to your problems. If you love shit like this, like, subscribe, follow below, comment. Let me know what part of the show resonated with you. And this is a fraction of Triadic Healing. If you want to learn more, click on the link below. Thank you so much, and may the kindest of words always find you.